Chapter 30. Collapse Dynamics. How systems actually fail and why collapse is slow, then sudden. Civilizations do not collapse as cinematic events. They collapse as phase transitions. For decades, sometimes centuries, decline accumulates quietly: capability thinning, demographic contraction, institutional drift, quality erosion, incentive distortion. The system continues functioning through inertia and legacy structures. Then, abruptly, the system crosses a threshold where internal stabilizing forces fail and decline snaps into discontinuity. Collapse feels sudden only because the slow phase is misinterpreted as stability. To understand collapse, we must distinguish between decay, degradation, discontinuity, and dissolution. Decay is the hidden attrition of capability. Degradation is the visible decline in performance. Discontinuity is the moment internal feedback loops break. Dissolution is the reversion of complexity into simpler forms. These are not separate stages but overlapping layers of the same mechanical process. The long, slow phase begins with organizational thinning, the quiet removal of deep competence. Veteran engineers retire without being replaced by equivalently capable successors. Senior medical staff burn out or emigrate. Skilled trades hollow out. The tacit knowledge that sustained complex systems, power grids, courts, regulatory agencies, logistics networks, dissipates. The system still works, only because earlier generations built structures with wide margins for error. This stage can last decades. As capability thins, institutions compensate with bureaucratic scaffolding. More audits, more procedures, more compliance layers, more reporting chains. This creates a false signal of stability. Busyness is mistaken for competence. Imperial Rome maintained legions on parchment long after it lacked the manpower to field them. Late Qing China preserved ornate court ceremonies while provincial administration decayed. Modern states maintain regulatory complexity long after they lose the ability to enforce it. Next comes functional hollowing. Institutions retain their shells but lose internal function. Courts operate but cannot process cases in reasonable time. Hospitals operate but treat overload as normal. Schools operate but stop educating. Infrastructure exists but decays faster than it is repaired. Police respond, but slowly, inconsistently, or only after escalation. Citizens experience this as ambient friction, errors, delays, missing records, contradictory instructions. This is the pre-collapse equilibrium, a system that appears stable but is losing the capacity to reproduce its own order. The true collapse dynamic begins when the hollowed system encounters a shock: economic, political, environmental, epidemiological, financial, or demographic. Healthy systems dampen shocks. Fragile systems amplify them. A minor liquidity issue becomes a banking crisis. A moderate heatwave becomes a grid failure. A manageable epidemic becomes a systemic medical collapse. A routine political dispute becomes a constitutional breakdown. The shock does not cause collapse. It merely reveals that internal capability is no longer sufficient to contain it. As shocks propagate, feedback loops fail. This is the discontinuity phase. Institutions stop synchronizing. Regulators issue conflicting directives. Courts cannot enforce decisions. Ministries contradict each other. Emergency services lose command clarity. Communication systems degrade under load. Collapse often begins not with riots or violence, but with institutional silence. Phones that go unanswered, offices that provide no guidance, websites that are not updated, officials who cannot act because their procedures no longer map to reality. Citizens recognize collapse not as chaos, but as unresponsiveness. Once feedback loops break, the system enters cascade failure. Nodes become tightly coupled. A failure in one domain rapidly transmits to others. A policing breakdown increases crime, overwhelms courts, overloads prisons, drains budgets, triggers political instability. An energy shortfall constrains manufacturing, disrupts logistics, reduces medical supply, weakens public health, triggers social unrest. A financial failure triggers unemployment, erodes tax base, collapses municipal services, reduces trust, increases non-compliance, accelerates fiscal decay. In this phase, A new pattern emerges: survival corruption. Officials bend rules to keep essential functions operating. Citizens bypass bureaucracy to acquire necessities. Police negotiate informal order with local actors. Businesses form parallel supply networks. Money loses informational stability as prices fluctuate. Collapse is not the absence of order, it is its informalization. Parallel to this, legitimacy disintegrates. Citizens withdraw compliance. The state increases coercion, censorship, emergency powers, police sweeps, arbitrary enforcement. Coercion accelerates legitimacy loss. Political elites fracture into factions: reformers, centralizers, opportunists. Governance ceases as elites fight one another instead of governing. The state becomes a stage for intra-elite conflict rather than a coordinator of society. The final stage is dissolution, the collapse of high complexity into simpler, locally sustainable structures. National capacity contracts. Administrative functions devolve to regions, tribes, clans, gangs, corporations, or local governments. Parallel systems, informal courts, local militias, private utilities, black markets, become primary systems. Citizens turn inward, relying on networks rather than institutions. The civilization does not disappear, it shrinks into a lower complexity equilibrium aligned with its remaining capability. Collapse is rarely uniform. It is patchwork. Some cities remain functional. Some regions maintain order. Some institutions retain competence. Others degrade completely. Collapse is spatially uneven but structurally general. Modern collapse is more dangerous than pre-modern collapse because of interdependence. Ancient systems were modular. Failure could be contained. Modern systems are integrated. Failure cascades. Food supply depends on global logistics. Healthcare depends on just-in-time pharmaceuticals. Finance depends on real-time digital networks. Energy grids depend on centralized synchronization. A failure in one node can propagate across an entire civilization. Collapse is therefore predictable in structure but unpredictable in timing. Predictable in the sequence: capability loss, hollowing, shock, amplification, feedback, failure, cascade, dissolution. Unpredictable in the trigger: the final shock can emerge from any domain. In the next chapter, we examine civilizational resets, how societies rebuild after collapse, why some recover and others stagnate, and what it takes to reconstruct capability from first principles.